I first met Father Michael Garanzini when I was a scholastic studying at Loyola University of Chicago, where many of you will know him from. We were in a massive room, big room, dining hall kind of atmosphere, ballroom kind of space, with about 80 Jesuits or so, 80, 85 Jesuits. And for some reason, we had to go around and introduce ourselves. And I was near the end of the list of introductions that may or may not have been intentional. And I was sitting there at the end, and I'm just getting a little bored of all of this. And I'm like, well, it's just Jesuits. I'm just going to say something, you know. And so I got up and I introduced myself and I said, hello, everyone. My name is Father Michael Garanzini. Thank you all for coming to Loyola University of Chicago today. And they all, Mike included, reacted very appreciatively. So I'm grateful for that. But fortunately, I am not Father Michael Garanzini, and I do not have to give this address right now. I just have to introduce him. Mike, as many of you know, is a St. Louis, son of St. Louis. Proud, I'm sure. He's a 71 grad of St. Louis University in psychology. He did a PhD in psychology in religion at the AJCU and University of Cal Berkeley. He finished that in 1986. He's the author of 3 books, many articles. He was a professor or an administrator at a number of different Jesuit universities, including University of San Francisco, St. Louis University, Fordham, Georgetown, and of course, Loyola University Chicago. He was the president there for 14 years, and he's just finishing now 2 years as chancellor. Since 2011, that is for the past 6 years, he's been the secretary for higher education for the Society of Jesus, the entire Society of Jesus, worldwide, and he was present in that capacity at the recent General Congregation, the 36th General Congregation that we've just finished. So we're kind of honored to be able to have some of that wisdom that he conveys to us here today. One of the most striking things, I think especially relevant for our conference here this weekend, that he accomplished during his administrative tenure at Loyola Chicago was helping to found, maybe to be one of the driving engines behind the founding of Arupe College, which some of you may know, which is the first Jesuit effort at something like a community college, at least a 2-year college that offers an associate's degree, the aim of which is to have the students graduate debt-free and be able to enter whatever university, maybe especially Jesuit universities, that they could transfer into. Arupe's founding motto, or in its mission statement, it says this: "We aim to be a rigorous liberal arts education for a diverse student population, many of whom are the first in their families to pursue higher education." It's a great goal, something we should be really proud of as we strive towards education and justice in the Society of Jesus, and Mike has been at the lead of this. He is going to talk today a little bit about building the bridge to justice, and in our discussion preparing for this, he mentioned to me that he's seeing some real interesting tensions and similarities in some of our keynotes and in many of the sessions that we've drawn. He's going to try to give a multiple-sided view to that, a multifaceted view to what's happened to us here this weekend in the style of a Jesuit examen, an Ignatian examen. So we take some of that spirit with us. He's going to give up about 20 minutes of that, and then 10 minutes about some major factors about what is happening in higher education for the Society of Jesus worldwide, and then we'll have a little bit of a discussion. I'd like to welcome Father Michael Garanzini.
I still wish you were Mike Garanzini. Well, a few of you have been very kind and have approached me and said something that just keeps depressing me, which is, I sure wouldn't want to be you after those 3 keynotes that we just had. So I need to tell you, if you think I'm going to sit there like I'm at a fireside chat that Franklin Roosevelt and Barack Obama would give anything to have performed, or if you think that I'm going to preach like Brian Massengale and sound like Martin Luther King Jr. with slides, or if you think that I'm going to do some board game up here to make all of this stuff really visible and clear to you, that ain't going to happen. You see, I know that you are all justice junkies, and you come here to get your fix. So my job is to reflect on what we've done, to tone you down, and to get you ready for the Monday morning withdrawal that you're going to experience. So that's what's going to happen. So sit back and relax. So I'm going to do just a little reflecting on what the society is up to basically to show you how in sync I think you are. This has been such a terrific, really extraordinary conference. And I want you to know how much you are in step and perhaps can help lead the way for the rest of our institutions globally. I can't say that outside of the United States. U.S. hegemony in the world of higher education makes it pretty difficult to keep putting USA Jesuit examples out there. But it's really true. We are doing so many things that would be the envy of Jesuit institutions around the world. So that's one of the things I want to do, is to introduce you to the society's thinking about higher education. The other thing I want to do is to reflect with you about the GC 36, our recent congregation, and how that is very much in sync with what's been going on here. One of the most fascinating parts of this, we've had obviously 3 superb speakers, and one of the most fascinating things I thought have come out during the Q&A. In other words, I think people here that are listening actually brought some gems out of each of our speakers that just made their contribution even more incredible, more salient, more important, I think, for us. When Ibu said, after a little bit of discussion back and forth with someone here, remember I said diversity is the view of justice you don't like. He's just reminding us of the incredible, complex world we live in, and he kept trying to bring that back to our attention. It's so much more complex than we originally thought, and justice is so much more complex than we have been thinking over these years, especially for us Jesuits, since our most recent congregations, the last 4 or 5 congregations following the Second Vatican Council. And then the question that we had that Brian got which was basically, do we lead with empathy or do we lead with truth? You've made the case for truth. Ibu made the case for empathy. And wow, that's where it is. That's the real dilemma today. And the Society of Jesus, if you'll notice, the documents that come from GC 36, the recent one that we had in the fall, they didn't really start with the faith that does justice. They didn't talk about faith and justice a whole lot. The theme is reconciliation. We had just come off of the year of mercy. Actually, we were involved in the last months of it, the year of mercy, when we were there. And the Pope had come to the aula, delivered an address, by the way, that emphasized the joy of the gospel, being with the poor, and basically discerning, where do you think the church ought to go? Every question he got when he took the Q&As, he was with us for 3 hours. I don't know any other audience that gets the Pope for 3 hours. But when he took the Q&As, every question wanted to put him in the position of, could you tell us what to do? We wanted him to tell us, give us some direction. And every response he would get around to, you Jesuits and your colleagues, you have the tools of discernment. You will know what to do because you will be at places the church isn't yet. So just use these tools of discernment and you'll figure it out. I'm not going to sit here and tell you. Incredible gift, incredible responsibility. And then when Sister Simone was talking, I thought one of the very interesting responses from her was, we were talking about, I think it was the issue of need-blind admissions, and that came up. And she gave us a zinger. Well, what should Jesuit prestige look like? Is Jesuit prestige different than the prestige that comes from being in the top 100, having the largest endowments, having the best, et cetera, et cetera? You know the score. What a question. What does Jesuit prestige look like? Do we need to slavishly follow the standards of higher education in the United States in terms of defining prestige, and even in terms of defining excellence? The Jesuit brand is pretty clearly a distinct brand. We worry that it's not as distinct as it should be. We talk here about what would make it more distinct, and that's what we're doing here. We're at the heart of the question. And how do we make that then the driver for our prestige? We live in incredible times. Brian could not have been more right, if you will, than what's been going on in the news the last day about the insidiousness and the persistence of racial hatred and bigotry and the need for racial justice. Incredible times. A friend of mine, Father Dennis Holzschneider, who's was just stepped down as president of DePaul University in Chicago. We're really good friends, and I was attending a dinner for him as he was stepping down, and as he accepted the applause and the award of the people there, he said, I've lived my whole adult life worried that my church would never get in step, was completely out of touch with reality. And I've lived the last 8 years confident that my country was finally getting its act together and moving. And then in November, I woke up. And those two things I realized had just switched. They had just flipped. I'm not as worried about my church now as I am about my country. And every one of our speakers has basically pointed us in the direction of the sins and the soul issues that affect our country, that we're responsible for dealing with, that we need to prepare men and women to deal with. And what an awesome responsibility that is. I want to talk a little bit about where the Society of Jesus is going. If you read the documents from this last congregation, you don't find a lot of things, many things said about the intellectual apostolate or higher education. One of the few things it says, few times the educational apostolate is mentioned, is number 34, more than halfway through the document. Our educational apostolates at all levels and our centers for communication and social research should help form men and women committed to reconciliation and able to confront obstacles to reconciliation and propose solutions. The intellectual apostolate should be strengthened to help in the transformation of our cultures and societies. The document speaks about reconciliation, about transformation, and does not emphasize those older categories of justice. Did we move beyond justice? I think the congregation assumed that justice and the work for faith, those two works, those two themes, and how inextricably tied they are together. I think they assumed we get it. I think they're assuming people like you are already on board and committed. And I think it was the influence of Pope Francis where they thought we need to address the issue of reconciliation because the fragmentation and the nature of the discourse around these social issues is becoming so coarse and so mean and so hostile. So do we need to step back a little bit and rethink what the gospel is calling us to? Do we need to become people with a little more attention to, as I start out to address a problem and an issue, can those who will be, in fact, perpetrators, causes, participants in the problem, those who might feel on the losing end of my attack, can I keep them in mind so that I can keep them at the table? Can I do this in such a way that I never lose contact with those people that I'm going to have to convince need to change, or this isn't going to work, or this isn't going to go anywhere? I think that's tough. I think you can probably appreciate this, but what I see going on among our students and is that this is going to be tougher. They're so incensed with the injustices that they see. They're so defensive about identity issues that for them, enemies are enemies. And there may not be a lot of ground to talk and a lot of ground for negotiation. Negotiation, in fact, might be a bad word. I think it takes a much more mature person to see that the end, I have to have the end in sight when I determine how to begin, so that I don't make that end impossible. That I think is our challenge. It is not always just truth and empathy. It is how to, whether we start with truth or whether we start with empathy, is how do we get to a more complete understanding of real justice in the end. So with that, reflecting on those documents, the international committee, we have an international committee for higher education, 2 people from each of the 6 regions in the world. The regions are North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Southern Asia, which is mostly India, and Asia Pacific, which is the other countries of Asia. They have 2 representatives each. Father Michael Sheeran is our rep from the US here, and then me, so we have two Northern Americans. We met for several days. We meet several days each year. And following from a conference that we had in Melbourne several years ago, 2 years ago, and following from this GC 36 documents, we decided we really need to start creating a couple of things, a plan, if you will, something that we could say to the 180 higher education institutions around the world. What are we trying to accomplish? What are we interested in? What do we want to promote? Well, here's what we want to promote. This is what we want to do. So let me just run briefly through this because the plan's not completed. There's more that has to be done on this. There's going to be some working groups set up, and the president's rectors are going to meet in Bilbao in the summer. That's next summer, next July, and really, hopefully endorse and buy the plan. But the issues are kind of obvious, and the issues, we decided we'll only do 5 or 6. Let's keep our focus, let's keep it as clear and narrow as we can. So what are those issues? So first, with the plan, you start with the vision statement. Now I know people like to diss these plans, but you have to be kind to a manager type like me. I know it's the enemy, but anyway. Our vision is to become institutions that promote peace and reconciliation, justice and faith through research and the formation of students in order to help in the transformation of cultures and societies. We have core values. Collaboration, depth, discernment are right out of the documents, and both Arturo Sosa and Adolfo Nicolas, our present general and our previous general. They have talked about this. You have heard this. You understand that this is really a new definition of academic excellence. When you say Jesuit brand, people say academic excellence. That's what they mean, right? They don't even say Catholic faith or anything. They say academic excellence. And this is a new definition, really. Our goals: create a vibrant network of regional associations in each of the areas. So we have AJCU, and in the South, they have Aushall, and those function very, very well. They're the oldest. But the other regions don't necessarily have such a structure at all, and none of the others have a full-time person working, let alone a staff of people. So there's a lot to be done. You know, there are 63, today there are 63, there could be 64, because the Indians keep inventing institutions. So they have 63 institutions, I think, and then they don't have a coordinator of higher education. So, you know, that's one of my jobs, to push this. We have to implement the calls of GC 35 and 36, that all our institutions should promote the faith that does justice and become communities of discernment and reconciliation. All those are key words. What does it mean, I'll come back to this, to be a community of discernment and a community of reconciliation? And why a university? Better serve the mission of the church by advancing Catholic social thought through teaching, research, and advocacy. And so we have 6 priority issues. For our strategies and priorities, there's some key strategies first for doing this. So these are the strategies. First, we're going to found the International Association of Jesuit Universities. We don't have one. We never had one. So we're going to have actually a formal organization for the first time. The second thing is we need a digital platform. Your work here at this conference, all of that should be uploaded to a site that every institution, including the non-US institutions, and every individual who is curious as to what goes on here could go and access. We have lots of communities. We have the business schools that are working on issues of economic justice, of inclusive environmental justice, and so on, integral environmental justice. And they talk, but you have to know where to go look to find them. Our environmentalists and ethicians that work and theologians that work with them, they have a vibrant community. Where would you find this? Spirituality people that are doing leadership training in Ignatian spirituality and so on. Where do you find this stuff? We need a common platform. The second thing is, that was 2. 3, we need effective conference associations. I just referred to that. And then we need to start looking at how we utilize, how we collaborate with, how we take advantage of the other Jesuit apostolates. There are things going on in the U.S. that do that. I tell you, we're unique. There are some things in Latin America that are doing this, and there's some things in Europe that are trying this, but we're unique at really trying to get the parishes, the high schools, et cetera, everything that we do connected. And so then, if those are the strategies, what are our priority issues? We have 6 of these. And here's where you come in. We need to expand our efforts to bring higher education to the marginalized and the disadvantaged. So how can we use our institutional base, or simply our resources that come out of our institutions, like our faculty, like our our retired faculty, our emeritus faculty, our graduate students, how do we use them to help deliver courses through the web, for example? You all know the Jesuit Digital Network. That's one tool bringing education to people of various places that are pretty hard to reach, like refugee camps. But we need more of this. We need, and this is something that came from every region. Every region has talked about the concern, the coarsening of the political rhetoric, I don't know how to exactly describe this, but the shallowness of our political leaders, their dependence on assessing where the public wants them to go and what the public wants them to say. They don't have a coherent political philosophy. We have a curriculum for them. It's called Catholic Social Teaching. We don't have to call it that, but we could just say your obligation to address the common good is what we're going to talk about here, and we got lots of ways to talk about it and lots of concrete issues in our country, in our land, in our region that need you to be smarter than you are. So now, I'm obviously other people will put the gloss on this, but I'm not the PR guy here. It's the formation of the political class. We're talking Latin America, we're talking Asia, we're talking South Asia, we're talking Europe. We're all talking the same language. The third thing, integrated economic and environmental justice. We know a lot about that. We've had talks here, wonderful presentations. Didn't talk as much about environmental justice. A couple of papers and panels that were dealing with the issue. But this is an important issue, and there's a real community, especially our scientists really want, for the first time, our scientists really want the mission thing to be talked about with them. We need to form lay and Jesuit leadership. We're not the only place in the world that is recognizing the fact that it's not just Jesuits and it's not just lay people that need to be formed, but taking on the leadership of these institutions really requires more training and more development. These institutions are complex, they're difficult, and when you become a leader, you have to face the pressure from above as well as the pressure from below. And what prepares you to do that? We need to deal with the issue of interfaith dialogue. We really need there to make sure that the word collaboration is probably even, I would put it before dialogue. If we collaborate on things together, we will find that we want to talk. Because talking sometimes just comes down to stating positions. So I think collaboration belongs there even before. And that's, by the way, Ibu's work has been, do something together and then sit down and talk about what this means in your faith tradition. It's much less toxic and difficult than trying to go at a theological problem. And finally, peace and reconciliation studies. Every place in the world has got to deal with the issue of the past and the issue of estranged and difficult discussions, tribe to tribe, indigenous peoples, and so on and so forth. Every place has got these issues, and of course we know we're not exempt from that. And so this is something that has to be, again, like the other five, a hallmark of our institutions. We're going to ask, basically say, to be a Jesuit institution, to be a Jesuit university, is not about whether there's a Jesuit president, and it's not about what's in your bylaws, it's not about how many are on your faculty. I think those things can be important to talk about, but to be a Jesuit institution is to be working on these kinds of questions. Research is terribly needed. Curriculum development is a must, and service and advocacy should be around these issues. So these are the things we want people to concentrate on. We'd like you to go here, if you will. And so that's where we think higher ed is headed. What we have to do now is figure out, I know it's an exercise many of you would cringe at, but what does it mean to measure this stuff? What does it mean to say in 5 years, we want to be at a certain place so that we know we're making some progress? Or we recognize when we don't make progress, we start to look at what are the hindrances to making some progress. So again, it's probably not a question you'd like to be volunteer for, but some of us have to do it. What I want to do is switch to the congregation itself and talk just a little bit about that. So let me pull this out and pull up for you a new side. Okay, we're good. So the document that the congregation wrestled with, it's not the most eloquent. It's not the most, I think it's not the most complete by any means. There's a lot of holes. There's a lot of theological work to be done on this document and the issues that it raises. Is there a theology of mission? Is there a clarity of what we mean by faith? Are there definitions of justice that are within the tradition and without and are not part of the tradition? Those are some of the things I think that have to be tackled with, and I think that's another invitation to our faculty to help us with. There are two major decrees with our call to use our apostolates, our work, our institutions for these three things: the service of faith and promotion of justice, and how are these two to be discussed and how are they linked? And the theme is reconciliation. Discernment and reconciliation. Discernment for how best to do this, and the ultimate goal is reconciliation. That may take a long time in some cases where we achieve that goal. Some issues are quite hardened and difficult. Doing so, big emphasis in communities that are linked with others of similar commitment. There was a big emphasis on not just what is the role of women or what is the role of minorities, but there was a big emphasis on what do all people, men and women of goodwill like us, how could we relate to them? How could we include them? How could we go beyond our walls and include people? You see why they're looking. I think there's a lot of expectation, hope that the universities will take a lead in some of this, because it's our business to keep going outside our walls to see how we can include. And developing our programs of social justice with reconciliation in mind. What does that look like? Do we understand that the perfection of justice is reconciliation? That's the challenge that comes out of these documents. Faith, as I've been able to glean it from the documents, it means understanding that we need to be reconciled with God, with one another, and with creation. It means recognizing that we live in a fragmented world in need of healing. It means accepting our place in the universe, which is, if you are Muslim, if you are Jewish, if you are Christian, then your stance before the Almighty is one of reverence, awe, fear, humility. I think those are the implicit understandings of faith. I think we share them with a lot of our brothers and sisters of other faiths. It's being, the Jews call it fear of the Lord. We don't like, perhaps we're not comfortable with that expression all the time, but it means knowing your place. Arturo Sosa, the President General, speaks of 4 requirements to seeing our work as apostolic. And I think we're ready to say we are an apostolic body. We're on mission. And what we do in the name of the kingdom of God. I don't think we need to apologize for that. I think that's where we stand. And we invite others that don't use that kind of language to participate and to come along with us and to help us refine and understand what this means. We are not a home for all faiths. We are a Christian home, a Catholic home that invites other faiths to make us better and make us understand, help us understand our own belief more clearly. He says it's apostolic when it is done on real problems with real people who experience the effects of racism, poverty, alienation, etc., etc. That's the first requirement. It's apostolic when our driving motivation is seen in light of building the kingdom of God, a kingdom of inclusion, justice, and peace. It is apostolic when what we do is done collaboratively, thus admitting our incomplete knowledge and our incomplete capabilities. We can't do this alone. What other actors, what other players need to be involved with us? And finally, when it is received as a mission, as a sending forth by a community in whose name we act. Our universities have to become more clear about sending you forth into the community as representatives of the institution and its commitment to justice and peace. So how are we going to do that? It's not a matter of simply, I use the university as my platform and I'm grateful, I buy the whole idea, and I've got my territory. How is it that we're linked? And that involves university becoming a community of discernment. What issue in our area, in our institution, what issue is most important for us? You know, if I'm no longer at Loyola Chicago, but if Loyola Chicago is a community of discernment, it would be saying, how do we deal with violence, gun violence, with the exclusion of the poor into part of our town that excludes all the other communities from having to deal with them, then stripping that community of resources that it needs for those people need to survive even. What will we do to address that Chicago issue? That would be, and never let go of the question, and constantly invite people in to talk about it. That would be a community of discernment. I think what Georgetown has done on the issue of slavery, it took the lead from the issue that was put right in front of it, and it said, we have to become a community of discernment so that we know how to respond to this. And they're not done. They're doing some things. The issue's not over. I think Brian the other day pointed to a little hole in the problem, the solutions that they're proposing. St. Louis U has begun discerning what will it do about racial justice in town. But every one of our communities is going to present us with a unique set of questions and a unique problem. How do we stay on that and not let that become just the topic of the day, an annual speech, a workshop, and then hopefully everybody picks up the ball and runs? I think communities of discernment are continuously reflecting. So GC's vision of the university, the intellectual apostolate, we are communities of scholars, linked with other communities of scholars dedicated to the same or similar goals, and that becomes a powerful instrument for social justice. It's what we're doing here. In touch with the poor, one of the opening lines of the documents that we have is, we heard accounts of the shocking forms of suffering and injustice the millions of our brothers and sisters endure, and that's where the Jesuits and the congregation started. We've heard this, we have to respond. And in ongoing discernment, so as not to lose sight of the complexities of our world in truth and the requirement of our ultimate goal, which is reconciliation. So what are the implications? I kind of hinted at that already. It's doing justice with an eye to keeping everyone at the table. It does not mean compromising, nor does it mean a rush to impose solutions. Who else, where else than a university, a Jesuit university, can this happen? There are no institutions, church, government, business, just to name a few, that have the reputation and the prestige, the opportunity to keep both sides at the table. Your business school can bring leaders of industry, and the rest of you can figure out how to deal with them. If we're going to solve problems of the environment, we can't label some group excluded from the discussion if the group owns the factory, if the group is responsible for the way the economic system runs. We have to figure out how to keep them at the table. All our ministries should seek to build bridges, to foster peace. To do this, we must enter into a deeper understanding of the mysteries of evil in the world and the transforming power of the merciful gaze of God, who labors to create of humanity one reconciled, peaceful family. With the poor, we can contribute to creating one human family through the struggle for justice. Those who have all the necessities of life and live far from poverty also need the message of hope and reconciliation, which frees them from fear of migrants and refugees, the excluded and those who are different, and opens them to hospitality and to making peace with enemies. That was, I think, the paragraph that kind of summarized it all. That's where the society wants to go. So what lies ahead? We need to explore the implications for research, for teaching, for curriculum, and for service and advocacy with each of the priority issues we talked about earlier. We need to be more inclusive and accurate in our definitions of faith, of justice, and of reconciliation. Our language is sometimes too ambivalent and unclear. It's too loose. And sometimes it's not in keeping with the Catholic tradition. Okay. Number 3, we need international and diverse teams to work on these. We can't do it alone. I don't think it's even worthwhile, completely worthwhile, to not hear from our brothers and sisters from around the world when we're even talking about a local problem. We could learn from the peace and reconciliation work, or all the racial justice work that's going on in other places, how they did it, what they did, what it took to get past some hurdles and so on. And we need to decide whether this agenda and plan can be measured and how it will be studied. We need to get a little more clever about putting something out there and then learning, instead of saying, well, we had that ideal and we used to talk about that issue, actually saying 5 years later, we had some successes, but this is too unfinished. A lot of issues are incomplete. We didn't get very far on some of these questions. We don't do that enough on these mission issues. Okay, so I was reflecting a little bit on this conference and what I heard here. I'll just share these with you, and I want to share with you a couple of suggestions for moving forward. I thought we had a richer and more complete narrative of the faith that does justice. I thought our three speakers were really powerful in what they presented to us and the wealth of topics, research, programs that were presented in the breakout forums. They're really incredibly rich, right? How does the gospel call to reconciliation inform what we do from the beginning, whether we lead with truth or with empathy? That should be or. 2, the papers, panels, and workshops demonstrated deep interest, appreciation, and much good work already toward this call to facilitate a reconciliation of God with humankind, with nature, and with one another. And 4 modest proposals. Your work is to figure out what to do with what you learned back home. I'm not going to tell you how you need to do that. You need to do that. You need to do your own reflecting. I was thinking about this assembly and what I would recommend to the next one of these assemblies, and I'd like to invite you to tell me what you think, or not me really, but to tell the organizers of the next assembly what they should be thinking about and doing to make this an even richer experience. First, let's take advantage of media resources that are available to stream these presentations to our home campuses. You know, when the high schools, International Association of Jesuit High Schools, when they meet in Rio, they will stream all of their major speeches and talks. They will stream that back to all the 2,000 high schools, so that those who couldn't go, because it's about 400 delegates, 2,000 high schools, those who couldn't go would be able to sit back and listen to those various speeches and talks. Would it not have been wonderful to have the chance for those people you left behind at work the opportunity to have heard our 3 speakers live? It would have been terrific. Now I think we can make podcasts and so on, but let's stream these things so that more people can be involved in this. I saw Sister Simone, and I said, while you were talking, I kept thinking, how do we get you in front of Paul Ryan? How do we get you? Well, it's not. Well, don't laugh. I mean, let's think about it. Think about it a bit. How do we get you in front of Archbishop Chaput? How do we? You had some things to say. In fact, you even mentioned Mr. Ryan's name by name. How do we do that? So I said, have you ever done a TED Talk? She says, no. I said, you'd be perfect for a TED Talk. And if we get you to do a TED Talk, then you could do the board game you had up here, the graph, and you could make your points and just concentrate on the issue of taxes and taxation. They're going to take that up, right? That's going to be the big issue. And you know what's going to happen? If you do a TED Talk and that gets seen by 480,000 people eventually, someone's going to say to Paul Ryan, have you seen Sister Simone's TED Talk? You don't have to go hear her. He's not going to do that. To Bishop Chaput, you don't have to go hear her. She'll never enter an audience where she's speaking, right? But in their own home, they might just look up the TED Talk because people told them, you should see the TED Talk. It's really kind of interesting. She's really entertaining. So I think we got to get clever with putting some things like that out there so that more people can share it than us who had the wealth, really. Keep the faculty engaged. I don't know how to tell you. This is hard for faculty. Thank you, all of you who are faculty. Thank you, Joe DeFeo, for bringing the Ignatian colleagues here. Thank you for all the faculty that did papers, because I know this is not the kind of thing your discipline rewards. This doesn't usually figure into stuff that you're expected to be doing by your department chair, your dean, and the university rank and tenure people. So how do we keep the faculty involved? How do we get them plugged in? And then can we start to think about things like publications that could come from this, so that they always feel this is a critical and important issue kind of conference to be involved with. The third thing, let's get the presidents more engaged. Now, I have a suggestion for the next one. You ask the president, we know you're very busy. We know you probably don't have time to come. This might be, in fact, during the only week that you can have for a vacation. Can you send a member of your cabinet so that your cabinet will get the report of what happened, and then maybe even invite the people from your institution that attended this conference? So you get the president to send a cabinet member here. And that might be the first step. But I'm thinking he might even want to, if you want to invite a trustee, you can. Hopefully there'll be someone as good as Sister Simone and Brian Massengale and Ibo Patel next time around for these trustees to hear. But just let's see if we can bridge. Can we bridge to the president? Can we bridge to the wider world with media, back to our campuses? Can we bridge this to faculty that don't get rewarded for stuff like this? And finally, this came to me. I'm just peppering you. I want to hear more from you. Should the issue that becomes most important, is it the coarsening of discourse on campus, the difficulty of students to accept voices they don't like to hear? Is that the challenge, just to name one? What is the most important issue, or maybe most urgent, or what would people say that have been through this we need another conference on? Because this conference isn't going to happen for 4 more years. So could someone in 2 years from now prepare a focused conference on that issue that is burning and urgent on our campuses, that would invite more thinking, more reflection, more papers, maybe some faculty, maybe the presidents, and so on? So my point about the bridges was, how do we keep lines of communication channels? How do we create avenues for people to get to us, or us to get to them? So that's what I wanted to tell you, and that's what I want to ask you. Do you have any other reflections or thoughts about what we've been through and what we could be doing at this and future conferences like this? You've been terrific. You've been excellent. We've been blessed with some excellent organizers and some beautiful facilities, and we're grateful.